I hope everyone has had a wonderful celebration of Hanukkah this year, and that it continues. And you might say, well, this is kind of dumb, and this is kind of obvious, but each year during the feasts, during the special times that we observe, although Hanukkah is not a commanded Torah feast, one of the times that we observe, usually there's a theme that develops for me every year. So like through the festivals, all 7 festivals of Moedim, there's a theme usually every year that I start to kind of see that God is teaching me things. And for this year, for Hanukkah, and again, super obvious, just the word dedication has just stuck out to me over and over. The word dedication over and over and over. And so why is that so obvious? Well, obviously that's because that's what Hanukkah means, right? Dedication. And so this is like again the last couple of weeks ago, this is a talk, a teaching, or whatever you want to say, that could be done in any church on a Sunday morning. Because some of these things are just elemental to our belief, to our process, to the way that we walk, to the way that we live our lives, to the way we practice our faith, and all of these kinds of things. And that is just simply dedication. Now, I don't want you to think I'm preaching to the choir, because this is not about Shabbat attendance, right, at OAM. Well, a little bit, but not all about that. But I want to read a couple passages from 1 Maccabees and just talk, let's kind of frame or reframe a little bit, I guess, about the idea of dedication and something that I want us to be encouraged and challenged about. So if we read in Maccabees, the first chapter, beginning in verse 41, First Maccabees just gets right into the action. It just jumps right on into it. And verse 41 says that the king wrote his whole kingdom that all the people should be one and abandon their particular customs. All the Gentiles conformed to the command of the king, and many Israelites delighted in his religion. They sacrificed to idols, and they profaned the Sabbath. So I grew up with this unbelievable fear of the New World Order, right? The one world government. Like that is the sign of the times that we're all supposed to be looking for, the New World Order, right? And so everything in my upbringing, maybe some of you, everything in my upbringing that happened on a global scale, all of the war and political stuff, geopolitical stuff, was always about the New World Order. It was always, currency, and everything was about the one world system. And yet when you read this is the New World Order. This is the beast in their time, where all of a sudden Antiochus, who's controlling everything, right? Because we know the story. We've talked about it a lot before, but he goes like, everybody just abandon your particular customs, right? Your gods and your worship and your whatever. You don't need all that, right? We'll just do everything the way I want it done. That's about as one world government as you can possibly get. And it says that all of the nations, they were happy to do it, and many Israelites. Okay? And so it goes on, verse 44, it says, the king sent letters by messenger to Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, ordering them to follow customs foreign to their land, to prohibit burnt offerings, sacrifices, and libations in the sanctuary, to profane the Sabbaths and the feast days, to desecrate the sanctuary and the sacred ministers, to build pagan altars and temples and shrines, to sacrifice swine and unclean animals, to leave their sons uncircumcised, and to defile themselves with every kind of impurity and abomination, so that they might forget the law and change all of its ordinances. If there is a passage in that relates to Hanukkah in the Maccabean story, it's this passage here that gets me every single time. Just don't do that stuff anymore. And the point is not that you just don't do it. The point is what we just read, that they might forget the law, the Torah instructions, and change it. That's the point. The point isn't not in not doing it. The point is that we forget and that we begin to change what God has shown us and God has taught us. Verse 50, it says, whoever refused to act according to the command of the king was to be put to death. In words such as these, he wrote to the whole kingdom. He appointed inspectors over all the people, and he ordered the cities of Judah to offer sacrifices, each city in turn. Many of the people, those who abandoned the law, joined them and committed evil in the land. They drove Israel into hiding, wherever places of refuge could be found. On the 15th day of the month of Kislev, in the year 145, the king erected a desolating abomination upon the altar of burnt offerings, and in the surrounding cities of Judah they built pagan altars. They burned incense at the doors of the houses and the streets. Any scrolls of the law that they found, they tore up and burned. Whoever was found with a scroll of the covenant and whoever observed the law was condemned to death by royal decree. So they used their power against Israel, against those who were caught each month in the cities. On the 25th day of each month, they sacrificed on the pagan altar that was over the altar of burnt offerings. In keeping with the decree, they put to death women and children, women who had circumcised their children, and they hung their babies from their necks. Their families also, and those who circumcised were killed. Or circumcised them, excuse me. But, let me just stop before we read the but and the last couple verses. Make sure that you understand that all the atrocities that we just read about that was happening to Israel is happening in a real time, in a real place with real people. And you know that anytime anything happens among us, among humanity, nothing is ever black and white, right? Most people are not strictly 100% agreeable with the Republican Party all the time, even though they have an R behind their name, or they pull an R lever when they go vote. Most people who identify as a Democrat do not 100,000% agree with everything the Democratic Party does all the time. There's a lot of spectrum. There's a lot of gradient there because humans are not black and white. We're not robotics. We're not robots. We have different opinions and different understandings and different experiences. And so when we read something like the story of Hanukkah and the Maccabees, we can tend to think like, well, there's a group of people in Israel that just sold out. And they just went, man, we've been looking for an opportunity to get rid of this old Torah and these old customs and everything. Finally, the Greeks are here and they've given us something else. We've been looking for this. Yay, it's a Christmas miracle. And then we think there's this other group that just they're like hiding in caves, right? With a fragment of a Torah scroll, and they're just reading the same thing, from days and weeks and months on end. And that's the only two groups of people you have. But this is not a fairy tale, this is real life. And every single one of us know that in between those two groups, there's a lot of people. There's a lot. Probably the majority of people are somewhere in between those two groups. They're normal, average people like you and I. And what do they see? How do they make decisions on how they live and what they do? Well, again, this is so hard for us because America's never been invaded militarily. We've never been conquered militarily. But what do you do whenever you have young children? And every time you walk out of your house, there are foreign soldiers that are controlling your streets. What do you do when you have elderly parents that are at the end stages of their life and they need certain things and certain care and certain freedoms and certain abilities to do things to care for them, and yet you are being told by someone who doesn't share your values how you are going to live your life? What happens when idealism meets reality? There are real people living in a real time, really being conquered by somebody not who just who's not gracious, but someone who is making them change everything about their identity. And there are a lot of people caught in the middle. So it talks about every month there being this mass death penalty carried out every month, as these people who were caught with Torah scrolls and caught circumcising their children and all these kinds of things. How do you get caught circumcising your child? Do you think the Greeks know what's happening when you're circumcising your child? Because at this point, this becomes a very private and very remote type of thing. Because you know that if you get caught, because you're doing it out in public or out in the open, you know that you're going to die. So how are the Greeks finding out that these Jewish people are circumcising their children? Probably from other Jewish people. Now, I'm not going to stand here and demonize those Jewish people that are ratting out their brothers and sisters. Because again, this is real life, and this is not about judging anybody. The fact is that some of us, many of us, maybe none of us, but those outside of us, make compromises every single day between chaos and order, between the beast and the angel, between the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge. Every single one of us make compromises because idealism at some point has to hit reality. And when it does, there begins to be a lot of gray area. Some of you can remember back to high school when you were a teenager and how idealistic you were. And how you had these huge dreams. And many of you, some of you watching, maybe even you might be living out those very dreams. But for a lot of people, those big idealistic dreams start to wane whenever you run into reality, right? And you realize, maybe the world's not everything I knew it was. It's the quote I read last week or a couple weeks ago. I'm not young enough to know everything, right? And so understand that in this time, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I think this is reflective of our time in a lot of ways. And not even necessarily so much now, but the way that it is becoming more and more as we go on. That there is going to be more gray area as we continue to live and as life continues to rock along. There's going to be more gray area. And we see this when we study the Torah. We see this as goyim, as Gentiles, as the nations who are trying to grasp and put our heads around the Torah and the Jewish culture and the Hebraic culture and all these kinds of things. We live in the area of gray. That's where we live. And it forces so many people to want to convert. Because it would be so much easier if I just am a part of a community where they just tell me what we believe, right? Where they just tell me everything's outlined. I'll convert, we'll sell everything, we'll move to Houston because it's our closest Jewish community. We'll move to Houston and then our whole identity and existence will be defined for me. And that'll be so much easier. It would be easier in some ways. And yet in some ways, you still wouldn't find what you're looking for. Because identity can't be given to you. Identity is something that has to come from inside. It's something you have to dig out. It's something you have to find. Which is why we have so much trouble, not only in Christianity, but in the Messianic movement, is because we run around looking for teachers and pastors and churches and denominations and segregations and all the other different things to try to tell us who we are. And nobody can give you your identity. No one can give you an identity. Your identity comes from in here. And if it doesn't come from in here, you will never be fulfilled and you will live your entire life chasing after your tail. And you'll be more prone to being used and abused and hurt and stepped on and walked on and thrown out because you don't have any stick to it because you don't know who you are. Because if I can give you an identity, somebody else can also take that identity away. And we are living in a time and have been living in a time. This is not an end of the world type of message. This has been going on for hundreds of years. And will continue until Hashem says it's enough. But we live in a time, ever since the fall of the Garden of Eden, we live in a time of gray. And this also is not to judge anybody who is not as committed as the next person, because that's not my job and your job to do. This is just to throw this out here for thought and for challenge. So you have all these things going on, and my gut is that there is some Jewish conspiracy against other Jews. And that's not a new thing. Sadly, it has happened through every exile that the Jewish people have ever gone through. And again, not to demonize those people, because some of you, you don't know it about yourself. I don't know it about myself, but we might be the very rats that we're talking about if push comes to shove. We might have it done to us by people that we would never suspect it would be done to. Verse 62 ends this chapter, and it says, "But many in Israel were determined and resolved in their hearts not to eat anything unclean. They preferred to die rather than be defiled with food, or to profane the holy covenant, and they did die, and very great wrath came upon Israel." I think this is so, I talk about this every year because it's so mind-blowing to me. That in Maccabees, the definition of defiling the covenant is eating unclean food. Now, what else was going on in this time? Let's compare and contrast this. What all have we talked about that was going on? Y'all remember, just for hearing me read it? What's that? Yeah, you got revolt happening. Why? Because what were they doing? They were setting up altars in all the cities and sacrificing, right, all this stuff. They were also they were burning Torah scrolls. They had set up the abomination, right? It causes desolation in the temple. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's some horrid stuff happening in the land of Israel. And it doesn't say that there were some that refused to sacrifice to idols and thereby damage the covenant. It doesn't say there are some that refuse to go in and participate in the contamination of the altar in the temple and thereby diminish the covenant. It doesn't say there are some who decided to not circumcise their kids or to circumcise their kids instead so that they don't diminish the covenant. The thing that they choose to continue to do or to not undo is that they refuse to eat unclean foods. And it just blows my mind why that seems to be the thing that is the focus and that is so important. It's unreal. We go to chapter 2, and we're introduced to the heroes of our story, Mattathias and his sons. And I want to read starting in, let's see, where do I want to go? In verse 15 of chapter 2, if you're reading along. It says, "The officers of the king in charge of the enforcing the apostasy came to the city of Modain to make them sacrifice. Many of Israel joined them, but Mattathias and his sons drew together. And the officers of the king addressed Mattathias, 'You are a leader, an honorable and great man in this city, supported by sons and kindred. Come now, be the first to obey the king's command, as all Gentiles and Judeans and those who are left in Jerusalem have done. Then you and your sons shall be numbered among the king's friends, and you and your sons shall be honored with silver and gold and many gifts. But Mattathias answered in a loud voice, although all the Gentiles in the king's realm obey him, so they may forsake the religion of their ancestors and consent to the king's orders, yet I and my son and my kindred will keep the covenant of our ancestors. That word keep, we translate that word as keep a lot. What else does that word keep mean? Guard. We will guard. See, because it's not just about doing or not doing. It's about forgetting and changing. Keeping means we're going to do it even though you say not to. Guarding means we're going to do it because it's who we are. Because it's our identity. It's because it's what makes us us. And it's what will make our children the same after us and their children after us. Doing it just because you said not to is immature. Guarding because of future generations and because of identity is powerful. He goes on to say, heaven forbid that we should forsake the law and the commandments. We will not obey the words of the king by departing from our religion in the slightest degree. And as he finished saying these words, a certain Jew came forward in the sight of all to offer sacrifice on the altar in Modin, according to the king's order. And when Mattathias saw him, he was filled with zeal, and his heart was moved, and his just fury was aroused, and he sprang forward and killed him upon the altar. At the same time, he also killed the messenger of the king who was forcing them to sacrifice, and he tore down the altar. Thus he showed zeal for the Torah, just as Phinehas did with Zimri, son of Salu. Then Mattathias cried out in the city, let everyone who is zealous for the law and who stands for the covenant follow me. We jump down to verse 49. It says, when time came for Mattathias to die, he said to his sons, arrogance and scorn have now grown strong. It is a time of disaster and violent wrath. Therefore, my children, be zealous for the law and give your lives for the covenant of our ancestors. Remember the deeds that our ancestors did in their times, and you shall win great honor and an everlasting name. Was not Abraham found faithful in trial, and it was credited to him as righteousness? Joseph, when in distress, kept the commandment, and he became master of Egypt. Phinehas, our ancestor, for his burning zeal, received the covenant as an everlasting priesthood. Joshua, for executing his commission, became a judge in Israel. Caleb, for bearing witness before the assembly, received an inheritance in the land. David, for his loyalty, received as a heritage a throne of eternal kingship. Elijah, for his burning zeal for the law, was taken up to heaven. Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, for their faith, were saved from the fire. Daniel, for his innocence, was delivered from the mouth of lions. And so consider this from generation to generation, that none who hope in heaven shall fail in strength. Do not fear the words of sinners, for their glory ends in corruption and worms. Today exalted, tomorrow not to be found. They have returned to dust, their schemes have perished. Children, be courageous and strong in keeping the Torah, for by it you shall be honored. What a speech. What a challenge. Hanukkah Dedication. Again, this is so hard not to come off as judgy or not to feel like I'm judging anyone, because like I said, I realize I'm preaching to the crowd. You guys are here. You brave the cold and the wind and all the things, the uncomfortableness to be here. Other folks are traveling. They have good reasons for not being together. And the whole of Torah keeping is not meeting together on Shabbat at OAM. But personally, and again, I can't tell you this. Only you can get along with God and figure out where this is. Your personal dedication. We're going to talk about personal first, and then we're going to talk about community. Your personal dedication. What does it mean? What is it for? Why is it so important? What's the big deal? Who cares? Listen, we all know that God is full of grace and mercy, right? God is loving and accepts repentance and extends his mercy and his grace and his patience to the ends of the earth. And I mean, after all, he knows we're human. He knows we can't get all this stuff right. And for us, he knows we're not Jewish and didn't grow up in this stuff, so we have a lot of wiggle room. We can be a little more sloppy than anybody else in our adherence and in our observance and in our overall kedusha. Right? Hanukkah Dedication. I read you a story last week about a gentleman who went and sought this guru, and the guru took him out of the water. Remember that story? And eventually held his head under the water and said, you'll be successful when what you want to be successful at, you want it as much as you want to breathe. And in the same way, dedication is something that we need to make sure that we are cultivating, and that make sure that it is a part of our character. It is a character trait that we are developing and cultivating every moment of every day, especially those of us who, from background or from wiring, whichever way is your case, have a tendency to need to feel like we're doing something in order to make it really important and to make it really meaningful. Sometimes dedication is cold. Sometimes dedication is boring. Sometimes personal dedication, getting up and saying your prayers in the morning. Oh, that's talking to us like we're kids. Yeah, because we are all kids. We're all children. But if having a strict prayer life is something that you've really felt connected to, you just haven't been dedicated enough to do it, listen, it's not easy, those of you that know, to get up every morning. Some of you that are not morning people especially whenever it's 20 degrees outside. It's not easy to get up in the morning and do your prayer time. It's not easy to find time during the day to do your prayer time. It's not easy maybe at nighttime, before you go to bed, or whatever your challenge is. And sometimes that stuff is not fun. And I'm not even say sometimes, I would even say most of the time. Most of the time it's not easy. Most of the time it's not fun. Most of the time it's not convenient. Most of the time it's not the thing you want to be doing. Most of the time. Do you think that the Maccabees, do you think that those faithful in Israel wanted to risk their lives to circumcise their children? Do you think that they wanted to risk their lives in the face of impending death to say, I'm not eating that ham sandwich? Because that's basically what it turned out to be. Eat it or you die. This happened when we were in high school, maybe after high school, I can't remember. When did Columbine happen? Does anybody remember what year that was? About what year that was? No. 96? Somewhere in there? I thought it was during the height. And this young lady became super popular. And this is not to trash or anything, but because she was asked, do you believe in God? And she said yes, and she lost her life that day. And the whole Christian world, that story, her legacy has reverberated through the Christian world for decades. And rightly so, she is held up as a heroine and as someone to be honored for her faith and her strength and her commitment to Hashem. But I just want to contrast this for a minute. What if instead of the question, do you believe in God or you'll die, on that day someone had said, that shooter had said, eat this ham sandwich or you're going to die. And she said no and lost her life. Would we get it? Would we understand? Would we just see her as much of a hero? Or him or anybody else that might have happened to? I just want to pull it into our kind of something that we remember and that we understand. Because this is what it boils down to. about dedication, about stick to it, about that inside something that, again, somebody cannot give you. Your own Kedusha, your own, the way that you have dedicated yourself to Hashem, the way that you have said, this is what I want to be. This is who I want to be before you, God. Are you dedicated to making that happen? Or does spiritual growth just come whenever it comes, just bebopping along life, and, oh, God will hit you a little something here or there, and I grow a little bit spiritually? Or is it something that we're dedicated to? No, here's the hard part about this is that nobody can police you for your own personal dedication. Nobody can do that. And that's one of the most freeing and scariest things at the same time, because we all need accountability. We all need somebody on us going, how you doing with that? How you doing with that? Have you messed up? Have you slipped? Oh, what about when you did that? That's not very in keeping with what you said you wanted. Your dedication fell a little bit. You understand? We all need that person. We all need those people. We do. But number one, our society is not set up like that. We read in the Bible, we read in the New Testament, confess your sins one to another, and we all go, like, yeah, well, I'm glad we don't do that anymore. That was a cultural thing back then. We're not set up for this in our culture, but we need it. And like I say all the time, picking on us as Americans, we're Americans. We're independent. We don't want anybody in our business. Don't tell me how to live my life. Put your seatbelt on. People that tell us stuff like for real, our really own good, and we're like, don't tell me how to live my life. I'll go out in this weather in shorts and no shirt on if I feel like it. We're so independent that we push away accountability. But the irony is that it's the thing that we need the most. I need somebody in my business going, hey, what about that? Hey, that didn't look like what you said you wanted. But do I like it? No. Am I going to pout and get puffy and huff up? Yes. And I'm going to push you away for a little while, all the while knowing that you're giving me exactly what I need. We need that. And so we have to allow it to come in. We have to allow this to happen. And this brings me to the second point, which is community. Listen, third time I've said it, preaching to the choir, I understand this. But for any of you who are not here, who are watching, because of other, family, travel, other, thing, weather, stuff, different things, this is the community that God gave you. Now, some of you might think, well, I decided to come. God didn't lead me here. I decided to come. Fine. Then be man enough or woman enough to say, you've committed here. You've committed yourself here to OAM. And not to me as a person, to the community. Whether you've committed yourself or whether you feel like God brought you here, brought you into our circle, kicking and screaming, whatever it might be, whatever the case might be. Especially in our Messianic Hebrew roots thing, circus, the idea of generational congregations is not a thing. You guys know what I'm talking about? Legacy congregations. Where my great-grandparents went to church here. You know what I mean? And this is, our family still is a part of this thing. Now, I understand there's a lot of dynamics there. I get it. I don't even know if AOAM will be a thing, in another 50 years. I pray it will be. But what I'm talking about is a commitment to a family, a commitment to a community. And say, you know what? Sometimes Joe sings really well, and sometimes it's like dogs howling. But I'm going to show up, and I'm going to worship, and I'm going to do my thing, right? Sometimes when Brady blows the shofar, I'm going to really tap his insecurity real quick. Sometimes it's beautiful and clear, and it just gives me shivers. And sometimes I wonder, where's the cat that's dying, right? But you know what? I'm going to... Like one of my old pastors used to say, the only thing worse than sitting through listening to a bad sermon is actually being the one that's actually preaching it. So this is understandable, right? You don't think when my voice is off, I don't know it. When the song selection is not great, I don't know it. When you don't think Brady doesn't know. You don't think Miss Becky doesn't know. You don't think Heather doesn't know when things are not right. Yes, we know. It's all good. It's all part of it. But having this as a part, saying, you know what? This is my community. This is where I go to church. This is my family. These are the people that I am going to do life with. These are the people that I'm going to wrestle with Scripture over. These are the people that I'm going to go to for encouragement and accountability. And if they tell me what I don't like, I'm going to have to go boudet. What's the pout? Yeah, I'm going to have to go pout for a little while, and then I'm coming back into community. When leadership calls me out and says, hey, don't want to be rude, don't want to get in your business, want to be really diplomatic, but that's looking really bad on you and the rest of the fellowship. When stuff like that has to happen, which it rarely does, but when it does have to happen, are we a people that can go and lick our wounds and not be offended and come back and restore our relationship and be a part of the community? You know, real New Testament-like. Are we dedicated to our community? And if you're just watching a live stream and this is not your community, you just saw it pop up, and you go, well, I'll just see what this guy has to say. Do you have a community, and are you dedicated to that community? Maybe you're Sunday, maybe you're still in Sunday church. Are you dedicated to there where you know you're supposed to be? Because things aren't always easy. Things are rarely easy. Most of us have lived long enough to know that. But where you decide to be, where you are dedicated to be, those people in Israel during the time of Hanukkah needed each other. They needed a Mattathias who took his personal dedication and showed it to everybody and stood as a light and a bulwark. They needed that one person to have that chutzpah to inspire and to ignite everybody else. But you know what? Then they all had to gather around each other and continue to ignite those flames. As we light the candles every night, it's about the light growing because our light spreads from one to another. And that's what community is about us shining light to one another, spreading light to one another, in inspiring and motivating each other in our own personal and our communal dedication. Did the Maccabees have any idea, did the Hasmoneans have any idea? Now, they are famous for rededicating the altar, right? But we've talked about they needed dedication even to get to that point. So there's dedication all the way through this thing, not just the dedication of the altar. Did the Hasmoneans, this rural priestly Jewish family in this little community of Modi'in, did they have any idea what their dedication, how it would ripple through time? Did they have any idea that because of their dedication, that over 2,000 years later, there would be a group of non-Jewish people sitting in a building in the middle of nowhere, Southwest Louisiana, with their symbols decorating the building, with commemoration of their courage and their dedication? Did they have any idea that 2,000 years later, homes across the world would be lighting lamps every night and blessing their God for wonders and miracles that he did for them in their time, and trusting that their God would also do those miracles for us in our time? Did they have any idea that their dedication would be talked about for generations and generations, not even inside their own tribe, but across the entire world? do we understand? And do we really get the importance of our dedication? I've said this for years, since we started the whole Torah thing, that this is probably not about you and I. If you've got kids, you're a little bit older, this is probably not about you and I. This is about the next generation. This is about what comes after us. This is about my children. It's about some of your grandchildren. It's about some of you who maybe don't have grandchildren yet, but you will. And they are going to want and need somebody to teach them the truth of Hashem's word. It's so easy for our dedication to slip when we don't see immediate return, when we don't see results. I know that some of you feel like, well, I'm older now, and if God could have only shown this to me when I was in my 20s, it would be different, right? I'm too old to learn Hebrew. I'm too old to, understand all this stuff. I'm too old to change some of the ways that I think and all that. And listen, my answer to that is, you don't think God knew that when Some of you feel like, well, I lost my kids already because either I didn't know this when they were growing up, or we changed right in the middle of them growing up, and now they're confused, and they don't know what to believe, and they don't know what we believe, and they don't know how to work it out, and all of that. And my encouragement to you and my challenge to you is stay dedicated. Be dedicated, because you have not lost anyone. You have not lost your children. What they want to see and what they need to see is, are you dedicated to this? If this is what you say is truth, if this is what you say you believe, is this what you say we want to live, are you going to be dedicated to it? Because likely what they saw in church was a little less than absolute dedication. And they want to know, is this going to be real? Is this what we're really doing? Is this who we're becoming? If it is, they need to see it from you 1,000% more than they ever did before. More than they saw Sunday church attendance, Wednesday night youth group, Sunday night discipleship training, whatever, Sunday school and all the things. Much, much, much more than they saw any of that in your former belief system. They need to see absolute dedication right now. They need to see candles being lit on Friday night or whatever your custom is. They need to see Pesach, the Seder being done. They need to see you waving at Sukkot. They need to see you attending Shabbat and being in community. They need to see you praying and reading your Siddur and reading Scripture and being your devotional time at home. They need to see you dedicated. You haven't lost them. They're just waiting to see if you'll be dedicated. And if you'll stay dedicated, I believe when those grandchildren do come along, then you'll have that very thing that Mattathias talked about. Your children will look back and say, look at our generations. They were committed. They were dedicated. And I would never even think this is possible, but maybe one day your grandkids or your great-grandkids will read First Maccabees, and they'll read Mattathias' speech, and they'll read how he talked about Abraham and his test, and David and his sincerity, and Joshua becoming a judge of Israel, and Elijah being taken up to heaven. And they'll read about all the dedicated people in Mattathias' background, and maybe they'll put you in that list, in their own background, in their own tradition, in their own recollection. And they'll say, because of my grandfather, because of my great-grandfather, because of my dad, because of my mom, because of the things that they taught me and their dedication, I know who I am. And I know what to believe. And I know how to live this out and how to be dedicated myself. So dedication is not something that we see immediately. But boy, is there a return. The Hasmoneans had no idea that what their dedication would do and how it would reach. And lastly, I'll just remind you of this. Because of their dedication, the most important thing for us is that Israel was still around for there to be a Messiah born into it. Had it not been for the dedication of the Hasmoneans, there probably wouldn't have been an Israel for Yeshua to be born into. So what is your dedication doing? Only God knows. It's not up for us to know, it's up for us to do. Not to just do, but to guard. To guard so that we don't forget and that we don't change. How will your kids and grandkids and the generations, your progeny after you, how will they know what the truth is? How will they know what to believe? How would they know who they are? Not because we did stuff, because we guarded. We guarded what God is teaching us.